Carlos had $23,400 in debt and exactly $0 in his bank account. Not a rough estimate, not a ballpark figure, $23,400. He knew the number because one Tuesday night in November he finally sat down at his kitchen table, opened every envelope he had been avoiding for 4 months, and wrote it down on a piece of paper. $8,200 on a credit card charging him 24.99% interest every single month. $11,000 left on a car he bought to look successful at a job that paid him $2,600 a month. $4,200 on a personal loan he took out 18 months ago to cover a gap he never managed to close. $23,400. He stared at that number for a long time. And here is the thing nobody tells you about that moment. It was not the worst moment of his life. It was actually the beginning of the end of the worst period of his life. Because for the first time in 4 months, Carlos was no longer guessing. He was no longer avoiding. He was no longer pretending. He had a number. And a number, no matter how terrifying, is something you can actually work with. Today we are going to walk through exactly what Carlos did next. The math, the decisions, the timeline, and the one move that changed the entire trajectory of his financial life. This is the math nobody shows you. Before that Tuesday night, Carlos had been living in a state of permanent financial fog. He knew things were bad, he just did not know exactly how bad, and that uncertainty was doing something very specific to his brain. It was keeping him frozen. He would get to the end of the month and feel a familiar hollow dread. He knew there was not enough. He knew the credit card bill was going to sting. He knew the car payment was due in 5 days. But instead of looking at the numbers, he would close the app. He would tell himself he would sort it out next week. He would order food delivery because he was too stressed to cook, and somehow spending $18 on a burger felt like the one small thing he could control. This is what financial avoidance actually looks like. It is not laziness. It is a survival mechanism. When the numbers feel too scary to look at, the brain chooses not to look. And every day you do not look, the fog gets slightly thicker. Carlos was 31. He worked in logistics coordination, earning $2,600 a month after tax. He was not reckless. He had not gambled away his savings or made one catastrophic decision. He had simply made 100 small decisions over 3 years that each made complete sense in the moment and complete disaster in aggregate. The car made sense when he signed the papers. The credit card was for emergencies. The personal loan was temporary. 3 years later, the temporary had become permanent and the aggregate was $23,400. Now meet Denise. Denise is 29. She was in a similar position 18 months before Carlos's Tuesday night. $19,800 in debt, same income bracket, same fog, same avoidance. But Denise had one conversation with a friend who showed her a different way to look at the numbers. Not a magical solution, not a side hustle promise, just a different mathematical framework for climbing out. Denise is now at zero. This is what she learned. The ego tax, the zero line, the 4-hour vault, and the one that flips the entire equation, the leverage flip.
Here is what we are going to walk through together. The ego tax, the exact monthly cost of pretending to be wealthier than you are. We are calculating Carlos's number down to the last dollar. The zero line, why reaching zero is not a failure or a destination. It is the most important psychological milestone of your entire financial life, and why most people miss it completely.
The 4-hour vault, the exact structure of Carlos's evenings that turned 4 daily hours from dead time into the engine of everything that came after. And the leverage flip, the specific skill, the specific platform, and the 60-day timeline that changed Carlos's relationship with money permanently. No motivation, no shortcuts, just the math and the story. Let us go. There is a line in every budget that nobody wants to talk about. It is not the rent, it is not the groceries, it is not even the debt repayments. It is the money you spend every single month to look like you do not have the financial problems you actually have. Carlos had this line, most people do, and until that Tuesday night at the kitchen table he had never calculated exactly how much it was costing him.
So let us build Carlos's ego tax together, slowly. Because when you see the number at the end of this calculation, it is going to change how you look at your own monthly spending. Carlos drove a 2022 Honda Accord. He bought it 3 years ago because he was starting a new job and wanted to make a good impression. The monthly payment was $340.
There was a 2014 Toyota Corolla available at a used car lot 2 miles from his apartment for $4,200 cash. It had 87,000 miles on it and it ran perfectly. Carlos had looked at it once and decided against it because it did not feel right for where he was trying to go. That decision cost him $340 a month, $4,080 a year, for the feeling of arriving at a job in a newer car. That is ego tax line 1. Carlos had 4 streaming subscriptions: Netflix, a sports package, a music service, and a premium news subscription he had signed up for during an election cycle and never cancelled. Total monthly cost, $67. He watched maybe 2 of them with any regularity. The other 2 existed primarily because cancelling them felt like admitting something. Ego tax line 2, $67 a month. Carlos ordered food delivery 4 times a week on average, not because he could not cook, because after a long day at work the app was right there on his phone and $18 felt like a reward he had earned. 4 times a week at an average of $22 including fees and tip, $88 a week. $352 a month. Ego tax line 3, $352 a month. Carlos had a gym membership at a premium facility near his office, $95 a month. He went 6 times in the last 3 months. He kept it because he intended to go more, and because the idea of cancelling felt like giving up on a version of himself he was still hoping to become. Ego tax line 4, $95 a month. Carlos was on a premium smartphone plan with the latest handset on a 24-month contract, $95 a month including the device payment. A basic SIM-only plan with the same coverage on his existing handset, which worked perfectly, would cost $28 a month. Ego tax line 5, $67 a month difference. Total monthly ego tax, $921. Total annual ego tax, $11,052. Sit with that number for a moment. Carlos was paying at $11,052 a year on a $2,600 a month salary to maintain the appearance of a financial position he did not actually occupy. He was not buying things he needed. He was not building memories or experiences that genuinely mattered to him. He was paying a monthly premium to feel like he was okay when the math said he was not. And here is the most important part. That $921 a month was not just money leaving his account, it was money being extracted from his future by interest. Because Carlos was carrying credit card debt at 24.99% APR. Every dollar he spent on the ego tax was a dollar he was effectively borrowing at 25% interest. The car payment alone was costing him closer to $425 a month in real terms, when you factor in the interest he was paying on the debt that car payment was preventing him from clearing. When Carlos finally saw this calculation written out on paper, he did not feel angry. He felt something more useful. He felt clear. He could see exactly where the bleeding was coming from. And bleeding you can see is bleeding you can stop. Over the next 30 days, Carlos executed what he later called the financial surgery. He sold the Accord. He bought the Corolla for $4,200 cash, money he borrowed interest-free from his brother with a handshake agreement to pay it back in 6 months. He cancelled 3 of the 4 streaming services.
He spent one Sunday afternoon batch cooking 5 days of lunches and dinners. He cancelled the gym and started running in the park 3 mornings a week. He called his phone provider and downgraded to the SIM-only plan. Month 1 after the surgery, Carlos had an extra $921 in his account that had never been there before. He did not spend a single dollar of it. He aimed it directly at the credit card. Most people think of zero as nothing. In mathematics, 0 is the absence of value. In culture, 0 means failure. 0 out of 10. 0 stars. Getting 0 on a test. We are conditioned from childhood to see 0 as the worst possible outcome. But in the specific mathematics of climbing out of debt, 0 is the most powerful number in the universe.
And understanding why changes everything about how you endure the journey. When Carlos started his financial surgery, his net worth was negative $23,400. That is not 0. That is a number that means the system owns more of your life than you do. Every morning you wake up at negative $23,400. The interest is compounding against you while you sleep.
Negative net worth means you are running a race where the finish line is moving away from you faster than you are moving toward it. Unless you intervene. Carlos intervened. Month 1, $921 from ego tax elimination aimed at the credit card. Balance drops from $8,200 to $7,279. Net worth negative $22,479. Month 2, same 921. Small additional $200 from one Sunday of freelance work.
Credit card balance drops to $6,158. Net worth negative $21,358. Month 3, Carlos picks up another small freelance project. Total debt payment this month, $1,340. Net worth negative $20,018. He is below negative $20,000 for the first time in 3 years. Something shifts psychologically at this point. The number is still terrifying, but it is moving. And a number that is moving in the right direction, even slowly, feels completely different from a number that is standing still or getting worse. This is what the zero line actually is. It is not the destination. It is the proof of concept. It is the moment the math stops working against you and starts working with you. Carlos reached the zero line 14 months after that Tuesday night at the kitchen table. His net worth was exactly $0. He did not go out to celebrate. He did not tell anyone except Denise. He sat in his apartment and looked at his phone for a long time. The credit card balance was $0. The car was paid off. The personal loan was cleared. He owed nothing to anyone. And here is what nobody tells you about that moment. It is quiet. It does not feel like a Hollywood ending. There is no dramatic music. There is no sudden rush of wealth. You still have $0. You still have the same job.
You still have the same apartment. But you own 100% of your next paycheck for the first time in years. The interest is no longer compounding against you while you sleep. The debt collectors cannot call because there is nothing to collect. 0 is not the finish line. 0 is the starting line. The real game, the one where the math finally starts working in your direction, begins at exactly 0.
Denise told Carlos something the day he reached 0 that he said he will never forget. She said, the system spent 3 years compounding against you. Now you get to spend the rest of your life compounding for yourself. That is what the zero line actually means.
Here is the uncomfortable truth about how most people spend their evenings when they are under severe financial stress. They escape. Not rest. Not recover. Escape. There is a difference. Recovery fills your tank. Escape just postpones the moment when you have to look at how empty it is. Carlos was an expert at evening escape.
After his shift he would get home at 6:15, change his clothes, and within 8 minutes he was horizontal on the couch with his phone in his hand. 3 hours of scrolling, an hour of television, midnight. Sleep, repeat. He was not lazy, he was depleted, and depletion reaches for the nearest source of relief. The problem is not the rest. The problem is that those 3 to 4 evening hours were the only hours in Carlos's day that actually belonged to him. His employer owned 8 hours. Sleep claimed 7 or 8. Commute and basic life maintenance took another 2. That left roughly 4 hours from about 6 PM to 10 PM that were genuinely his to direct. And he was handing all 4 of them to content platforms every single night. If he gave those 4 hours to entertainment, he would wake up tomorrow in exactly the same financial position as today, times 365. But if he protected even 2 of those 4 hours and pointed them at something that increased his market value, the math of his life would eventually invert. Carlos built what he called the vault around his evenings. Here is exactly what it looked like. 6:00 to 6:30. Decompress. No phone. No screens. Cook dinner. Eat at the table. Let the nervous system settle. 6:30 to 8:30. The vault. Phone in another room. Laptop open to one specific thing only. No tabs. No notifications. 2 hours of focused skill building. 8:30 to 9:15. Application. Take what he learned and build one real thing with it. 9:15 to 10:00. Wind down. Read something physical. Plan tomorrow on paper. The first week was brutal. His brain screamed for the phone. The silence felt aggressive. By week 3 something shifted. The silence started to feel less like punishment and more like protection. And in that protected silence, Carlos started building the thing that would eventually flip the entire equation.
Let us talk about the most honest thing anyone has ever said about getting out of poverty. Working harder at a low-value job will not make you financially free. It will make you exhausted. Carlos understood this intellectually, but understanding it and knowing what to do about it are two entirely different things. What Carlos needed was not more effort. What he needed was leverage, a specific capability that the market would pay him for, independent of how many hours he physically showed up somewhere. This is the leverage flip, the moment you stop selling your time by the hour and start selling a result by the project. Carlos spent his 4-hour vault learning one specific skill: short-form video editing. Not because it was glamorous, because it matched 3 specific criteria that Denise had laid out for him. 1. The barrier to entry was low, he already had a laptop, CapCut was free, every tutorial he needed was on YouTube at no cost. 2. The market demand was exploding. Every business, every creator, every brand in 2026 needed short-form video content.
The demand was growing faster than the supply of people who could deliver it competently. 3. It was learnable to a marketable standard in 60 days of consistent evening practice, not mastery. Marketable. Good enough to solve a real problem for a real client. Carlos spent month 1 of his 4-hour vault watching tutorials, following along and building practice edits using free footage. He made bad work. He made embarrassing work. He kept going. In week 6 he edited a 60-second video for a friend's small business at no charge in exchange for a testimonial. In week 8 Carlos created a Fiverr profile with free sample edits. Day 4 after the profile went live, his first order, $75 for a 90-second edit. He spent 3 hours on it, $25 an hour, more than his logistics job paid per hour after tax.
Month 3, $380 from Fiverr in addition to his regular salary. Month 4, $720.
Month 5, $1,100. His first month earning 4 figures from the skill. This is the leverage flip, not a lottery win, not a viral moment. A specific skill practiced in 2 protected evening hours over 60 days until it was worth something to someone. And here is what changed beyond the money. Carlos's relationship with his employer changed. He was no longer financially terrified of losing his job.
He had a second lane now, small, early, but his. The tight, suffocating feeling of being completely dependent on one paycheck began to loosen. He still had the logistics job, but he was no longer trapped in it. That is the leverage flip. It does not replace your income overnight. It removes the trap overnight.
And removing the trap changes everything about how you show up, at work, at home, and in the quiet of your own mind at midnight.
So here is your one move. Not the motivational version. The specific one. Tonight you are going to do what Carlos did on that Tuesday night in November. You are going to sit down at a table, not on the couch, at a table, with a piece of paper and a pen, and you are going to write down your real number. Not an estimate, not a rough idea, the exact number. Log into every account.
Open every envelope. Add up every balance. Write the total at the bottom of the page. That number, however terrifying, is your starting coordinate. You cannot navigate out of a place you refuse to look at. Once you have the number, you are going to do one more thing tonight. You are going to calculate your own ego tax. Go through your last 30 days of spending. Find every recurring cost that exists primarily to maintain an appearance rather than serve a genuine need. Car payment on a vehicle you could downgrade. Subscriptions you barely use. Food delivery you order when you are tired rather than hungry.
Premium anything you pay for because the basic version felt like admitting something. Add it up. Write the monthly total next to your debt number. That ego tax monthly figure is your most powerful weapon. Because unlike your debt, which requires months to eliminate, your ego tax can be reduced starting tomorrow morning. One phone call to downgrade a plan. One tap to cancel a subscription.
One Sunday afternoon of batch cooking that eliminates 4 food delivery orders. You do not need to eliminate all of it immediately. Start with the largest line item. Just one, this week. Then take whatever you free up and aim it directly at your highest interest debt first. Not the biggest debt, the highest interest rate. That is where the math bleeds fastest, and that is where you stop it first. This process is not fast. Carlos took 14 months to reach 0. Denise took 11. Both of them will tell you that the hardest month was month 1, Not because the actions were difficult, but because the results were invisible. The credit card balance dropped by $900 and still looked enormous. You have to trust the math, even when you cannot feel it working. Because the math is always working. Every dollar you throw at that balance is a dollar that stops compounding against you forever.
Start tonight. One number. One ego tax line item. One payment. That is the whole system.
Nobody handed Carlos a way out. Nobody sat him down and explained that the car he was driving was costing him $425 a month in real terms when you factored in the interest. Nobody showed him that his 4 evening hours were the only real capital he had left. Nobody told him that the skill he needed to flip the equation was learnable in 60 days on a free app. He was 31. He was $23,400 in debt. He was avoiding his bank account and ordering delivery food with a credit card that was already maxed. And then one Tuesday night he sat down at a kitchen table with a piece of paper and decided to look. That decision, not a lottery win, not a promotion, not a lucky break, that single decision to stop avoiding the number and look it directly in the eye, that was the moment everything began to change. You are not behind because something is wrong with you. You are behind because nobody showed you this math. The ego tax, the zero line, the 4-hour vault, the leverage flip. The system was not designed to show you these things. It was designed to keep you paying for them without ever realizing you had a choice. Now you know you have a choice. The question is what you do with tonight.
Here is your challenge for this week. Tonight, write down your real number. The exact total. Every account. Every balance. One piece of paper. Then calculate your ego tax. Find the single biggest line item. Cancel it or downgrade it before you go to sleep. Drop the amount in the comments, not your total debt, just your monthly ego tax number. How much were you spending on appearances without realizing it?
I read every comment on this channel and I respond to every one. If this video changed how you see your numbers, subscribe right now. Because next week we are talking about the hidden monthly costs that quietly slow down your climb back from zero, and the one account system that stops them permanently. Carlos's story is not finished yet. We will see you there.